Hi folks, welcome back. My name is Warbass. Today is the 21st of July at the time of recording this. We are 3 weeks into Julive. I managed to get 5 sets recorded out of 6 sets performed this week because I forgot to turn the camera on for one of them. If you don't know what I'm talking about, welcome to the Julive project, where I try to do a daily 30-minute live set with this pair of synthesizers here. And then on the 7th day of the week, Fridays, I record a video commentating and walking through the set from the day before. This is the kind of end of the week 3 recap video. So we're going to look at this one. This is yesterday's set 16. As I get this started here, I think in this particular recap video, I'm going to be kind of mixed between explaining what I'm doing in the set and also talking about some of the complaints I'm starting to develop with the way I've kind of configured things. So if you haven't seen my sets before, my cases, I've kind of got what I refer to as a B case and an A case. B case is very drum heavy, kind of tightly sequenced with a ton of distortion and stereo noise and extremely really heavy drums. And the A case is designed to sample, mangle, and kind of stretch that into a weird ambient droney space. So the 2 cases are independent instruments that work really well together. And that's one of the core issues and kind of bits of friction that I'm running into, because there are aspects now where I would change what I was doing if I was going to always use these as a pair that were always together. I'd probably restructure things a little bit differently. One of the things I'm doing here right now is, and I'm going to do this a lot in this particular video, is my right hand on the corrupt knob right here of the data bender, which I have in the purple mode, which makes it a DJ filter on all of the kind of wet signal coming out of data bender, which positions it much more nicely in the mix, and I think is super, super playable. Adjust my mic a smidge. There we go. So one of the issues that I'm having right now is that I want to be able to sidechain my kick at the end of my chain. So this kind of corner of my A case is designed to kind of polish the output signal, because I take the files straight off of this SD card here in the wave recorder and line them up with the video, and then that's it. I don't do any kind of post-processing or in computer mastering or anything. Jumble Henge, Shackmate High Pass, Libre Legio, all 3 of those play a big role, especially when the A case is just by itself. When the B case is involved, Jumble Henge kind of plays a much smaller role, and the stereo matrix mixer is doing a lot more of that, those mixing in different elements, mainly because so much of the complexity of the sound is coming from the different drum elements of the B case, and less so balancing between panharmonium and beads and a loop in the A case, which is what I usually use Jumble Henge for. So I'm wanting to be able to have a Jumble Henge style mixing now also in my B case for those drum elements to get a better mix earlier in my signal chain. And I want to then have my sidechaining, which happens here in the cockpit 1U, closer to the end of my signal path. My issue is that if I ever separate these 2 instruments, then I want the opposite. I want it how it is today. So much data bender in this set. It's really nice at generating like sub rhythms for these kind of noisy drum bits. One of my issues I'm having with the sidechaining thing that I was talking about, so I do my sidechaining in the cockpit 1U right there. I generate an envelope with Zadar specifically just for the sidechain signal. So I got this trigger down here, kind of channel number 9 on the drum sequencer is my sidechain trigger, I guess. Usually if I'm going to do a 4 on the floor kick, then I do a 4 on the floor sidechain as well. The issue, I guess the one reason that I like the cockpit, because I have a lot of gripes with it. One reason that I like the cockpit is that it's one of the few modules that lets you selectively sidechain in a mixer. And what I mean by that is you can apply the sidechain to any of the 4 channels or inputs that you're putting into the cockpit, or all 4, or as I have it, 3 out of the 4. So I can send my kick into channel 1, send things I want to sidechain into channels 2, 3, and 4, and then patch in the sidechain signal, and those things then create a new cohesive mix on the way out. The channels and elements that I want responding to the kicks envelope, which again is actually controlled by an independent envelope, are mixed then together with an element that isn't being sidechained against that. I haven't found any other module that handles it that way. I think one of the closest ones is maybe the kick gain, but that is a kick module with sidechaining built in, and it's just such a restricted way of thinking about positioning a kick in your mix that I don't really like it as an idea. Sorry, my cat just barged in here. So there's almost no other module that I've found that lets you do that kind of both merge and sidechain in one. And ideally, I would want that kind of sidechaining down here. But I don't necessarily want to take the cockpit and Golden Master entirely and put them in my A case, because I've had that there before, and I just don't think it's that necessary. So I played around with the idea of moving, almost swapping the mixing strategies in the 2 cases, bringing Double Henge into the B case, moving this pair of 1U elements into my A case. But something just doesn't gel right for me there. So I also really like the Golden Master's quick mutes, which I'm using, I think right now. Looks like only the low end is going through. And there I'm gonna, well, it looks like I didn't actually do anything. Sometimes I'll change my mind, I guess. I'll use those to, you know, selectively mute, toggle different frequency ranges of the B case so that it can kind of mesh better and dance a little better with the A case. The thing is, if I'm just using the A case by itself, the Golden Master isn't super necessary. So the thing I'm getting closer to doing, which I've talked about in a couple other videos, is selling off the Polygogo, opening up a bunch more HP in my B case, using that to address mixing in my B case, getting a smaller oscillator that can live up there that will play nicely with the rest of the sounds. This Polygogo is great, but there's so much going on in that case that the complexity that you can get out of Polygogo is not really appreciated by the way I'm using it, or by the rest of the mix. It is almost always an afterthought kind of element, or a secondary piece to a particular segment or part, and it can be so much more, and I just don't think I'm using it to its full potential, and I don't think my kind of current style of making music really will. This is taking up so much space. I'm thinking if I can use that space to address some mixing issues I have with the B case, maybe that will make things better. This is one set, and I think I put this on the thumbnail for this set, where panharmonium played a really big element. That kind of shifting sine wave, I believe, is panharmonium right there. And one of the things I do with panharmonium a lot is have the blur at about noon, and then use only like 2 or 3 oscillators on the sine wave mode, or the kind of super sine, and then slow down the sampling of how often it's taking a kind of an FFT of the incoming signal. And that's what I've done in a lot of these sets. Later in this set, near the end of it, and I'll talk about it when we get there, I kind of do the inverse, where I completely get rid of the blur, crank up the number of oscillators and crank up the sampling frequency that it's leveraging, and use it as much more of a resonance, almost harmonic effect on drums. Somebody commented, I think it was earlier this week, referencing a Mylar Melodies video about how when you're the one putting on the set, your kind of sense of time is a little different than someone who's listening to it. And I think that kind of then shows up in your pacing and maybe how anxious you might be as a performer to move on to the next element or the next segment or part more quickly than you really need to. And I think I'm guilty of that. At the same time, when I've listened back to each set the next day, my pacing is one of the things that I thought I liked the most, the speed at which I'm kind of moving from segment to segment, albeit that is a recipe for more mistakes, more elements that kind of don't mesh well. It's a lot more transitions to, satisfyingly pull off, whether they're like drops or slow ambient pulls or whatever. Each one still is a bit of a risk when I'm actually doing this, of like, okay, I have an intention in my head. Here's what I think it's going to sound like when I do, slide this fader or blend these parts in, and whether it does is something that kind of only improves with this kind of deliberate practice. So for this set, I really tried to slow down, and there's a lot of more drawn out ambient kind of drony parts because of that. And I also just let some of the drum elements just like drive and ride out for quite a bit longer than I have in previous sets, just to give them some space to develop. This is one of those moments where in my head, I know I'm building up to a moment where I need to bring in some decent kick. So what I'm doing here with my right hand, I'm about to probably mute the low end on Golden Master, or unmute it potentially, actually, maybe it was muted, and play with the dry wet, which I use the top of Axis for to dry wet the 200 grits. I want to be able to bring in a kick and have it be really satisfying. And I don't remember if I pulled it off or not at this part. Hearing that back, it definitely didn't do what I was hoping it did. And that's another, like, right there, an accident that I have to just kind of live with and try and play through. Where I pulled the joystick down too far. This joystick is my kind of master cutoff for both of the 200 grits, or both of the 100 grits that I refer to as the 200 grits. And sometimes if you position it in the wrong spot, it really cuts a little too hard on the filters. and then I have to kind of play through it to make it sound on purpose. I've been really trying to make sure I don't get into a set and just stop and start over. I have done a couple like false starts where I'll be like maybe 30 seconds in and I just chose the wrong way into the set, and I'll just reset, clear up what I was doing, and then make another run at it. But I don't get 10 minutes into one, or I haven't, at least so far this month. And let's see how far we are now. Almost 15 minutes into it. If I make a mistake right here, part of this practice is to just play through it and try and turn it into something that works. And I think some of that is developing the muscle memory, knowing where your sweet spots are, having a nice home base. You can go to a couple home bases that you can quickly return to, and developing a couple of strategies for which way to take things. If you sometimes, actually get too noisy and squealy, what can you do to make it even more noisy and squealy to the point where it becomes its own thing? And in the inverse, earlier in the set, I think I pulled out some of the volume, which I'm leveraging the matrix mixer for one of the elements, and it got too quiet. So instead of quickly bringing it back up and making it sound like there was an audio issue or something, how do I start a new quiet moment in this set and just embrace it and kind of lean into it? So I think this right now is Polygogo. The Clank Chaos is generating a bunch of random modulation. Those kind of 3 gray cables there that are going into some of the different wave kind of shaping elements for Polygogo. But at the same time, when it's going through then Data Bender and the 200 grits, and then, oops, as I knocked the light, and then coming over to the A case and going through, some of it's going through Panharmonium, some of it's going through Beads, some of it's going through Starlab, some of it's then also going through Guillotine before Starlab. So I have like 2 different paths of parallel distortion, stereo parallel distortion, where for Polygogo, which is such a complex oscillator is a loaded term, but it's a detailed oscillator. So much of its character is lost in this setup, I think, versus in other times and other kind of versions of my cases that I've had it in the past. And so I just feel almost like a little guilty about it, both in terms of what its potential is for as an instrument, or as an element of an instrument, and also how I'm just using the space and what else I could do with that room. Part of my maybe most guilty pleasure that I want to try out is another kick. I've had my eye on the Steady State Fates Entity Ultra Kick. And since some of my issues with the LXR as my drum synthesizer and its different elements, is some of the kicks don't hit in a satisfying way. Sometimes they are great, but often I have the cutoff on my mid 100 grit positioned in such a way that I want it to resonate with the frequency of the kick. And when I change drum kits, which I do throughout the set, I'll change the drum kit 4 or 5 times at least. Some of those then resonate at different fundamentals. They don't hit as hard as I might want them to. So one of my potentially really bad ideas is to get another kick drum and layer those 2. Something that's a little more steady, that's going to fill out the low end, and I know will always fill out the low end, and then rely on the LXR's kick drum to kind of be more of a character element, providing a little bit more of the transient, providing a little bit more of the uniqueness, and then of course being modulated with that more feature between the 2 kits that I might have selected at any given time. That's one of the things that I kind of want to explore using this space for. Maybe another mixer, maybe like literally a second jumble hinge. There's another volume mess up right there. The Ultra Kick, a smaller oscillator. And maybe that's it. I'm not sure if that would actually even fit in that space. that once every 16 steps note change is the drum sequencer here sending a trigger via, I think it's channel 14, this one down here, I believe, to the pressure points clock via brains, to shift the pressure points column across, that little dot right there, which then controls in those 3 rows of the pressure points. And I've explained this in past videos. The top one is the start point of the looper's loop, the middle one is the length of the looper's loop, and the bottom one is the speed that the looper runs. And so I'll change those across, and as I sequence across this way, all of pressure points becomes like a triple or a 3 layers of an 8-step sequencer going into the looper. And since the looper is sampling then the entire beat case, I'll turn it into these kind of like semi-granular drone elements that are then in key with the beat case, but I can kind of pull them all the way out. And one of the fun things is to leave a couple of these with a higher loop length. Right now all the loop lengths are the smallest possible. So you can see the little white dot is really small on the looper there for how long the loop is actually playing. I found a lot of joy out of leaving 1 or 2 of the columns of pressure points with a longer loop length, so you get this kind of like hum, 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 stutter, 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 stutter as a little bit of loops played, and then back to that hum, which can add a little bit more of a blend between the 2 cases, so it's not so much we're in heavy drum land and now we're in, you know, drone land, but merge them together in a way that isn't simply having some of the beat cases signal always still coming through, which I do sometimes. One of my other, one of the modules I've been looking at for a while is miso cornflakes to potentially replace beads. But there are some of these like almost string instrument like, or like a bowed string, not pluck, but like a bowed string instrument sounds that I've been getting out of beads lately that have been pretty satisfying. I've always been kind of on the edge about whether beads is what I need it to be, but lately it's been nice at creating these kind of unique tones out of the looped signal. And I think eventually what I need to do is invert the patch over here. So instead of taking a loop on the looper and then controlling the looper's loop in a kind of pseudo-granular way with pressure points, having the B case come in and go into beads and then just freeze the beads buffer and control beads with pressure points, and then have beads and the rest of the A case actually live loop on the looper. So using the intro looper as an actual looper instead of in this kind of pseudo-granular way, which I use it so much, and leveraging beads frozen buffer to do kind of what I'm currently doing over here. The one reason I don't, or one of the reasons I guess I don't do that right now, is because I just enjoy the looper's interface so much. It's so pleasant to use as a module. The way it handles stereo versus dual channel mono is exactly right. The visual feedback is fantastic for what's going on, and the combination of, you know, this chunk of my A case, you really like the half divided right down there, the kind of silver to black border, that half of the A case, I'm just so pleased with that. I've kind of just stuck to what has worked, when in reality I might be able to, you know, pull a really different character out of the case if I use beads with a frozen buffer instead of taking a short loop on the looper. Since I'm not really beat syncing that loop at all, I'm just grabbing it and knowing I'm going to mangle it I probably could use beats for the same thing, and then choose the time position using pressure points, choose the length of the envelope position using pressure points, and then pitch using pressure points. And like that would be the same as what I'm doing with the looper in a different footprint. And then that would open up the looper to do other weird, stereo echoes or other looper things or whatever. There's this kit that I haven't touched at all that I've played a bunch this week on the LXR, Clickety, I think it is. I can't remember what number it is. But with the amount of like different resonant elements and reverbing elements in the A case, combined with the clicks going through Data Bender and then the 100 grits, it's this really nice and almost ear-tickling different element of the sound that is rhythmic. It's not pure droney, it's not pure ambience, and it's not like industrial kicks in your face the whole time. But it's been a nice third place to kind of develop these kind of other rhythms without being too bass heavy, that can build tension towards something that actually is bass heavy. That's one of those places where I think having an additional kick drum that is more standard and consistent throughout the set, like the ultra kick or something, layered with a setup from the LXR that is purposely not bass heavy. Like the kick drum on the Clickety kit on LXR isn't super heavy, and I don't think it should be. I don't think editing it to make it super heavy would actually improve things necessarily. That kick is bouncing a lot in my headphones right now, more than I probably wanted to. I think that's a lot of Data Bender. So this is the bit I mentioned earlier, and I was talking to somebody in the comments. I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. Who was it? Goldkalb, about panharmonium, and I think this is the moment where I believe I edit the speed. So it just came in right there. Because it's got the tiniest bit of lag behind the drums, it kind of fills in the gaps in the rhythm in a weird syncopated way. That I think is really nice. I don't know if it's an always on kind of thing, but it is nice to have panharmonium to be able to pull it into these kind of quick, responsive, reactive modes, and then also have it blend way out into these new droney modes. So I think my hand right now is on the number of oscillators that panharmonium is using. It looks like it kind of settled around noon there, which is like in the 10-ish oscillators, I think. The signal for panharmonium, and I feel like I need to diagram this out at some point, anything that comes out down the second column of the matrix mixer goes to panharmonium. Then panharmonium comes back into the fourth row, and it also goes down then out the first column and out the fourth column. The first column goes straight into jumble henge. The fourth column goes through guillotine and then back into the matrix mixer again. And then it goes back down the first column. So that panharmonium signal is actually two different potential elements here coming out, in, out of the matrix mixer, so that I can blend the B case live, the A case live, or like the sampled loop live into the panharmonium, then run the panharmonium through the distortion, and then mix that distortion back into the main mix and mix that then through Starlab. It's probably way overcomplicated for what it needs to be, but it helps get the volume loud enough on panharmonium to sit in the mix, and I think distortion sounds good on it. One of the things that I remember talking to somebody about a long time ago about panharmonium is that it can help if you treat it as like a real oscillator, a real voice. Give it a filter, give it some envelopes. You know, I have it typically going into the Optimix, which is neither a filter nor an envelope, but as an LPG, like it's a little bit of both. And sometimes I'll turn the control knobs all the way down on the Optimix to play it like a more traditional plucky synth element. That new tone, that kind of overtone that's happening, is also another kind of guilty pleasure with Starlab of cranking up the feedback and setting the delay time at like 12:30. You can hear it kind of fall apart as I increase that delay time. Got a little clipping in my left ear there too. But if you get that delay time position just right, you can get it in key with the rest, and it's kind of a car-plussy extra element that blends and pulls things. That's it for this week. Hopefully in week 4 of Julive, I get another 5 or 6 sets out. I'd like to get 6 if possible, as long as I can remember to turn the camera on and nobody gets sick. Then I haven't decided how I'm going to deal with the end of July. You know, there's not 28 days. It's not a clean 4 weeks. So maybe this version of the video will actually come on the 31st instead of next Friday. I'm not sure yet. Maybe I'll do a longer version, or do 6 sets, another one of these, and then maybe like a live patch where I talk and play at the same time. We'll see for those last couple of days. If you've been following along, if you're one of the handful of folks that seems to listen to every day's set, thank you. It means a lot, and appreciate everyone's feedback and conversation and thoughts. If any of my rambles or kind of ideas of where to take the case, the setup that I mentioned in this video sound ridiculous, or ones that you've tried and didn't do what I'm hoping they might do, or maybe they remind you of a better way of doing what I'm trying to do, let me know. This has been super helpful to try and create and improve as a musician kind of in public in this way, and I hope to continue that. So till tomorrow, thank you. Peace.